evening, you're watching the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. Oman Refineries and Petroleum Industries increases its production by 27% at the end of June 2018. A Palestinian teenager is martyred by Israeli live fire during Friday's border protest. And United States pledges to provide around $300 million in new security funding for Southeast Asia. Those are the headlines, and now for the news in detail. Oman Refineries and Petroleum Industries Company production increased at the end of June by 27%, as per the National Center for Statistics and Information. The statistics indicated that the diesel production increased by 26% to reach more than 14 million barrels. Similarly, the production of 91-octane fuel increased by 36% to reach 6.75 million barrels. However, the production of 95 fuel decreased by 23% to be 5.94 million barrels. As a result, its sales dropped by 25%. The American Newsweek magazine applauded the efforts exerted by the Sultanate of Oman to develop its ports as part of its economic diversification plan. The magazine report stated that Oman seeks to optimize the use of its strategic location in the Indian Ocean by constructing roads and developing Sohar and Salalah and Dhaka ports, which comes in line with the government logistics plans as global economic powers give special consideration to ports in the Indian Ocean due to its huge significance for international trade. Scores of mourners attended a funeral procession today for a Palestinian teenager who was hit by Israeli live fire during Friday's border protest and later died of his wounds. The teenager, 15-year-old Murad Ziad al-Suri, was one of 2 Palestinians killed in yesterday's protest, in which at least 220 others were wounded. At least 157 Palestinians have been killed and 1 Israeli soldier shot dead by a sniper in Gaza during more than 4 months of weekly Friday border protests that began on March 30th. Israel has lost tracts of farmland and forests to fires set by kites and helium balloons laden with incendiary material flown over from Gaza. Less than 2 months after a landmark U.S.-North Korea summit in Singapore, Pompeo flew back to the city-state yesterday for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations summit and suggested that continued work on weapons program by North Korea was inconsistent with its leader's commitment to denuclearize. Pompeo's visit came amid a confidential UN report which said that North Korea had not stopped its nuclear and missile programs in violation of the United Nations sanctions. The 6-month report by independent experts monitoring the implementation of UN sanctions was submitted to the Security Council North Korea Sanctions Committee late yesterday. Pompeo thanked ministers at the meeting in Singapore for their efforts in enforcing sanctions on North Korea and said ending North Korea's nuclear program would take time, but he was optimistic that it would be done within a timeline set by the 2 leaders of the 2 countries. North Korea's foreign minister today criticized the U.S. for urging that sanctions be maintained against Pyongyang after Secretary of State Mike Pompeo asked the international community to keep up pressure against the reclusive regime. Ri Yong-ho told a security forum in Singapore that despite goodwill measures taken by the North, Washington was raising its voice louder for maintaining the sanctions against the DPRK. He criticized insistent moves manifested within the U.S. to go back to the old, far from its leader's intention. Impatience is not helpful at all for building confidence, especially advancing unilateral demands will further deepen mistrust instead of reviving trust. Ri added, as long as the U.S. does not show in practice its strong will to remove their concerns, there will be no cause whereby they will move forward first unilaterally. U.S. officials have publicly been optimistic about the agreement, but progress appears to have been slow. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo pledged today to provide nearly $300 million in new security funding for Southeast Asia as China forges ahead with plans to bolster its engagement in the region. Pompeo unveils the figure to reporters on the sideline of a meeting of foreign ministers from the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations and other officials from around the world in Singapore. The new security assistance will strengthen maritime security development, humanitarian assistance, peacekeeping capabilities, and counter transnational threats. The United States said earlier this week it would invest $113 million in technology, energy, and infrastructure initiatives in emerging Asia, which he called a down payment on a new era of U.S. economic commitment to the region. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan today said Turkey would impose sanctions on the two U.S. officials in retaliation for a similar move by Washington in a row over the detention of an American pastor. Turkey's holding of Pastor Andrew Brunson on terror-related charges for almost 2 years has sparked one of the most intense crises between the NATO allies in years. But in first comments on the dispute since Washington imposed the sanctions on Wednesday, Erdogan also appeared keen to ward off any further escalation by saying that neither side had an interest in a lose-lose scenario. Erdogan's announcement was a tit-for-tat response to Washington's decision to impose sanctions on Turkish Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu and Justice Minister Abdülhamit Gül. The Turkish lira, which has plunged in value this year, has already reached the $5 to dollar mark for the first time in history over the sanctions. 39 people were killed in a suicide bomb of a mosque in eastern Afghanistan. 2 burqa-clad militants attacked the mosque in the city of Gardez in the province of Paktia, where more than 100 people had gathered to offer prayers. At least 80 people were injured when the 2 men struck with guns and explosives at the mosque. A senior government official said the militants opened fire on the worshippers and one blew himself up. Security guards stationed at the mosque gunned down the other militant. Still to come in a news bulletin. Taira Valley drawings in Chile's Atacama Desert are considered as a heritage site that can develop sustainable tourism in the region.
عبق فاح بين جنباتها فنفثت سلاما برائحة لبانها. حلقت عاليا نحو السماء فنقشت بأبجدياتها تاريخا جميلا، وبكرمها أمست مضربا للأمثال. مهرجان صلالة السياحي 2018 من 10 من يوليو إلى 25 من أغسطس.
Welcome back to the news from the Sultan of Oman Television. The Ministry of Commerce and Industry stressed that it is currently working on giving authorization to customs clearance offices to process transactions for all types of Gulf certificates of origin. It is worth mentioning that the ministry has previously converted the issuance of such certificates from paperwork to electronic versions through the Invest Easy portal. The ministry aims at simplifying the process for exporters and companies working in this area and creating a positive investment environment by accelerating the processing time without the need to visit the ministry offices. The main index of Muscat security market lost 235 points last July, recording a decline for the 5th consecutive month. The trading last month closed at more than 4,800 points. The trading came at a time in which the national economy recorded a positive performance during the last few months of 2018. The gross domestic product in the first quarter of 2018 rose by more than 7 billion Omani Riyals compared to 6.6 billion Omani Riyals in the same period last year, and it recorded growth by 6.5%. Open-air rock paintings in the world's driest desert pay testament to the importance of the Lama to millennia-old cultures that traverse the inhospitable terrain. Working in Chile, Atacama Desert want UNESCO to recognize the Taira Valley drawings as a heritage site so they can develop sustainable tourism in the region. Taira is described as the most complex in South America because of its astronomical importance, as well as the significance to local shepherds. First rediscovered by a Swedish archaeologist in 1944, the rock art is between 2,400 and 2,800 years old. It is made up of a gallery of 16 paintings, more than 3,000 meters above sea level on the banks of the lower river that traverse the desert. Now for the general weather forecast around the Sultanate. Cloudy skies will prevail over the coastal areas of the governorates of Dhofar and its nearby mountains, with chances of intermittent drizzle. The rest of the Sultanate will have clear skies with chances of cloud accumulation and thunder showers over the Hajar Mountains, and low clouds and fog late at night and early morning are expected over the coast of the Arabian Sea and the Sea of Oman. Winds will be south to southeasterly light to moderate, and the seas will be slight to moderate with a maximum wave height of 2.5 meters. This is Sultanate of Oman Television. Before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. Oman Refineries and Petroleum Industries increases its production by 27% at the end of June 2018. A Palestinian teenager is martyred by Israeli live fire during Friday's border protest. And United States pledges to provide around $300 million in new security funding for Southeast Asia. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsrooms and the studio, it's good night.